Welcome to the Glowshaw Business Chat series. In these interviews, Wes is chatting about all things business to serious professionals from a variety of industries. Listen in to hear more about their challenges, opportunities, and the lessons they've learnt along the way.
Right, hi Tris. Thank you for joining us on the latest Glowshaw Business Chat. I've known you for a long time and you're a very good friend of mine, so really appreciate your time today in joining us. I know this story and I absolutely love it, but can you please just go through the background and how you got into property development?
Well, in short, I'd say by chance, but I started out as working in media and graphic design, and someone identified some DIY that I'd done on my first property I bought with my sister, and thought I was quite good at what I did, which I still today don't believe. And I think I'd swung a couple of doors in my own DIY way with the kind of blunt screwdriver I could find in the drawer. Mm-hmm. Anyway, knowing in construction, or hearing, because a lot of my friends were in construction, how much they were earning at the time compared to what I was as a fully trained individual in that industry, I thought I'd take the chance. So took some advice on some various tools that I might need, which was pretty much walked around a shop to show what I might need rather than me working it out, and went onto site. It was a renovation of a hotel at the time in Bournemouth, where I informed them I was a carpenter. They threw some questions at me. I didn't quite know how an interview on a construction site would go, but it was quite simple. But the guy asking me was looking for some decent answers that I didn't think I had the right answers for it. But anyway, they believed me and they took me on. So I was going around a hotel doing carpentry and hiding it. I think I hid the facts for probably 8 years. No one ever worked me out. But I think a lot of it in construction, it's not rocket science at the end of the day. It's construction is, there are dangers and there are things you do need to know and there are regulations around it. But ultimately, if you've got attention to detail and thought, you can do quite a bit in construction. So I went through those initial years frightened that I'd get worked out at some points, but essentially sat the knowledge of, at the time it was a carpenter from Scotland. He was fantastic at carpentry. So I got some very good lessons from him. And there were a few moments during it where I remember turning up to do a roof on a block of flats. It's a block of 14 flats, and there it was, a superstructure built. Turned up on a load of timber, or sticks as we call them, on the floor. And the guy who was, without him knowing, my guru and teacher, didn't turn up. He decided to go on a bender for a week. And so I was left with a stack of timber and a load of wall plates that I need to put a roof on. So there was a lot of jumping in the deep end as well, but got through it. Got identified at the time by developers. They could see the focus I had in it, I think, and the hard work I wanted to put in. And so they took me under their wing, and I then learned how to run the sites through them. Again, for them, they were pushing because they wanted as much out of me as they could get. But for me, it was just valuable education. So I took it. And after 8 years, I set up my own development business and construction business. So yeah, it was, call it jumping in the deep end, but learned a hell of a lot by doing it.
Excellent. Is the roof still on?
I've never been back to see it. Yeah, it didn't come with a guarantee. No, it was a very good roof.
Excellent. So during your time as a developer, can you share either one or a couple of your biggest bloopers, learnings?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of learning, even since doing my own development stuff. There's always lessons to be learned. Even today, there are new things. I'm building a waterfront property at the moment, which I've worked near the water before, but everyone's different. So you don't know what ground conditions you've got, and you've got tidal waters and things. So you're constantly thinking on your feet with these sort of things. But I think that there was one, the most simplest of plots, and there was a lady who, unfortunately, she got planning on her garden for a property. Her husband had got it. He was a builder. Unfortunately, he passed away, so she was left with this plot of land, and she tried to sell it to some other developers, but I think they were getting quite bullish, and they were just constantly knocking on her door and stuff. So it got brought to me by an agent, and I said, yeah, it's a small deal. It's a single house, a very simple build at a moment when we were building some bigger, more complex builds. I thought, yeah, we'll take that on. Turned out to be one of the biggest pigs there was to build, because it was supposed to be something simple on the top of a hill. And as soon as we put a bucket in the ground, we not only found water, but we found that the property next door didn't have any foundations. So we had to look to retain, because we were reducing the ground levels, we had to look to retain their property to obviously stop it from moving at all. So by the time we got through that complex bit, we were going to pile to retain their property, found there was high water table, believe it or not, at the top of a hill, when you could literally see the sea some few hundred meters lower.
Wow.
So we couldn't pile because of this high water table, so we had to look to build a different system to support that property. We did that, and then realized we couldn't do the foundations for the house because of the clay content and the high water table. It was just basically water everywhere, so we had to build the house on a raft. So yeah, that was quite an interesting one, from what I thought would be the simplest thing we'd done in years to one of the biggest pains in that period. So that was a learning lesson. I haven't had many real mess ups, should I say. Yeah. So yeah, I can't think of too many mess ups.
That's good.
Well, I'm going to say that.
Yeah, you're good at what you do. So absolutely.
No, you're so reliant on other people, though. You're reliant on other people a lot. You're reliant on your engineers to do their job and to come up with the calculations for the steels and the foundations and such like, as you're reliant on the architect to get the drawings right, so that essentially you're given the details of what's supposed to be built. But ultimately, you take those details and you do work out a lot for yourself, because of, you're there every day on the face of it, so you've got to make the decisions around what you're given. But you are reliant on that information a lot.
No, absolutely. And just listening to you there as well, on a conversation with another developer, actually, they were talking about team, like how important it is to have a team built around you. And you just touched on it there. So the importance of, like you said, like architect, building surveyor, like solicitor, insurance broker.
Oh no, I'm still trying to find a good one.
Let me know when you do, okay?
You have to edit that.
They'll leave it in.
Yeah, it is a true thing. It's I say it a lot, actually. You wouldn't be what you are without your team, and even down to the small details, the suppliers and things. I think it's so key to have that rapport with suppliers. And I hear one of my suppliers, they say that there are people ranting and raving down the phone at them because of, I don't know, materials aren't coming on time, or the delivery didn't happen, or whatever else. And I feel that approach doesn't really get you very far, because you ultimately drop to the bottom of the queue. And my suppliers are very reactive, just for showing them appreciation. And I think that's such a key thing. And then you've got your site labourers and people beyond just the labourers, but if you have the right team, you can rely on them, and they are what put it all together at the end of the day. Yeah, without them, it wouldn't be right. In the last year, my expansion, I've handpicked a lot of the people from previous journeys that create that crucial team.
Excellent. And listening to what you were saying, the kind of fascinating talk around what should have been a simple plot to becoming quite a complex build, kind of brings me on nicely to kind of the biggest risk for you when you're looking at buying land or building a property. What the biggest things that you look at where potential risk? Knowing you as I do as well, you're quite a risk adverse person.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see and hear your feedback on that.
You're right. Development is always a gamble. I don't gamble anything in life, I find, but that is my forte, and that's what I enjoy, passion for, and that's ultimately what I'm going to do, because it's the only thing I'm fairly good at.
Underselling yourself.
So yeah, you are right, risk adverse. So A good example, a plot I'm doing at the moment, I was buying it where it was going in for planning. The developer felt he was overstocked, should I say. We were going into last year, 2020, when COVID was just kicking in, and I think he had multiple properties on the market, and he had some going for planning, and he wanted to offload some of his stock. So there was this plot for a couple of houses. It had done most of the planning journey, but there were a few issues still to get along. I said I'd take it on, but before I did, I spent a day on that site with my leveling kits, looking at all the levels and the information he'd handed me, just checking everything. And from that, I highlighted a number of additional costs that he had not either known or disclosed, to do with the levels on the plot. And ultimately, there was quite an impact on it of, I think it was about £30,000 for the fact that there wasn't enough fall on the drains. So I needed to introduce pumps to that system. And then the connection for the infrastructure in the street wasn't in the street directly outside. It was another 2 streets away. Big impacts on costs. So yeah, I do survey a lot before I commit to something, for sure. Yeah, everything I look at. And I've had various ones in the past where, I've had plots sold to me by an agent. I say sold. I hadn't bought them at this point, but they were trying to sell it to me, where it had planning, and the drawings I was given were incorrect. They weren't showing that the houses actually needed to be excavated 2 meters deeper than the plans they'd shown me.
Right.
Which had a huge impact on piling and such like. Well, it actually killed the deal. It was just not something to go into. And then I watched that. The guy trying to sell it to me, the landowner at the time that had got planning, decided to build it out for himself because he didn't take my findings. And ultimately, I saw those impact him. And I still think now, 4 years on, they're not sold. Wow. So it's so worth looking into every element of it. And I'm very cautious of that, because obviously you take the wrong gamble, and ultimately that could stop your game.
Absolutely. So the risks there within the land, looking at kind of the layout, the land, the drawings. What about the actual build, like the materials, the build itself, and the risks associated with that, or that you've come across, or do you look at?
That doesn't worry me too much. I think the things I assess, the risk side of it, are ultimately the impacts until you're out of the ground. It's always until you're out of the ground. There's so many hidden things. And the other one is the market, knowing the market. So the build costs can be impacted by getting out of the ground. But then ultimately you spend all your time and money building these products. You've got to know and feel confident about the resale for them as well. So they're the risk factors I look at. As for the actual materials, not a lot would put me off, unless I was buying something where the planning system had dictated it needed, which is rare. I've not actually come across it myself, but if it dictated certain materials that were more expensive than what the budget allowed. But actually, the fabric of a building doesn't put me off, not at all. You can make a few of those decisions yourself as well. The councils are quite open to some change on materials.
So you mentioned with regards to planning, have you found that changes in planning over the last 12 months have helped or hindered your plans and developments?
It hasn't affected me. To be fair, in the last 12 months, I've picked up what I have picked up had already gone through the planning system in the last 12 months. So the only elements of it I've been dealing with are the building regulations, and I've not had any issues from that side of it. What I do know and understand, and part of the reason why I haven't gone into the planning system in the last 12 months, is because I hear it's been a nightmare, particularly where I operate, Bournemouth, Paul and Christchurch Council. They joined forces, and I think it's nigh on impossible to get any form of communication, let alone a decision from them. So I haven't entered into it, to be honest.
Okay, no, it's fair enough, and it's a good point as well. Like I said, difficult to communicate, so leave it alone, so to speak.
Yeah, and of course the added thing with people working from home, it's been quite difficult to communicate.
Yeah,
So yeah, I've kind of kept myself away from that system as much as I can.
No, that's a good point. And one area actually that we've come across with regards to new builds, and certainly developers, and where we've been able to help those developers, is timber frame versus traditional construction. And the reason being is that some developers are not asked the right questions, or just omit to let their broker or insurer know that they are doing timber frame construction. I know in general you do traditional, but with the timber framed, effectively, if it's not kind of disclosed or advised, then it could potentially void the policy if a claim were to occur. They're obviously a much higher fire risk. Can you give me your thoughts on timber framed compared to traditional construction new build houses?
Do you know, I do like timber frame. I can't remember the last timber frame I did, to be frank, but the only reason I don't do so much timber frame is because I'm always cautious of the end user and the mortgage companies, essentially. I think people have this belief that it goes back a long way, that timber frame is inferior to traditional. And being a carpenter and knowing how timber frame can operate and work, I'm actually a big fan of it. And of course, elsewhere in the world, it's used mostly timber frame, but it's quicker for sure, and ultimately it would be cheaper to build. So I'm all for it. But like I say, the only reason I don't generally do it is because I'm trying to produce a product that I know will sell quick without too many issues. But I'm actually a big fan of it. Okay. And I've always very much enjoyed working with it as well. I'm a carpenter at heart. So I have a good understanding for it, and much more passion for it than I do traditional building. Because traditional build is heavy, it's wet, it's just a more clunky process. But it is favoured, certainly in the past, by mortgage companies and by the end user. They have this belief that I don't know how long it will last, but ultimately timber frame could last as long as any traditional build if it's treated correctly.
Sure. Okay. No, that's really interesting. Thank you. So, kind of moving on, where do you see the opportunities in the development world at this moment in time?
Yeah. Well, it's turned on its head since COVID, I found.
Okay. I
was building properties that I said I would never build originally. I said I'd never build anything that's going to sell for over £1 million, because of the thing. They have a slower sale period, I always found. And we found ourselves building properties over £1 million. And then when Brexit came along, our particular market was very much second home markets and business owners moving out of the city. When Brexit came along, that went very quiet. So I re-engineered things to focus on the properties below £1 million. And for me, that was the absolute safe market. And I then watched the more expensive properties hanging around, sat around, not moving, and things were just sat there for a long period of time. Whereas the starter homes and that kind of below £1 million bracket was really, they were selling like hotcakes, which was great, especially with all the incentives that the governments give. But then COVID came along, and I won't say flipped on its head, because the below £1 million market is still very vibrant, but the more expensive properties have been all selling out. So yeah, where's the opportunities at? I still believe there's more opportunity in the less than £1 million bracket, so that's still my focus. But the permitted development, there's still these rights under permitted development for commercial to residential. That's always a good one to find. There's still plenty of that out there. It saves a lot of planning issues, and it opens up pockets of residential opportunity where usually there wouldn't be. So there's opportunity there. Location-wise, I still believe the south and the south coast is a good market. For buyers, people like it down here. So yeah, they're my kind of focuses.
So interesting. You talked about commercial to resi and how you see that progressing. So we've seen that during the first lockdown of COVID, a lot of businesses were thinking that flexi working, people being productive, everything was going quite well through people working from home. By the third lockdown, we were seeing that productivity had potentially reduced, or being told by businesses that productivity had reduced. there was concerns around mental health issues from people being isolated, being at home, not having that human interaction. And so there's almost been like a 360-degree shift in businesses thinking they didn't need offices to now thinking they do need offices, but mainly or perhaps offices where there's flexi working, so not as much office space being required. We're certainly looking at that as a business, where we're going to be offering a lot more flexible working to suit the team. But how do you see that office space convert into resi, or that commercial environment for shops and offices? How do you see that progressing?
I think the high street, my prediction is the high street itself, so not so much the commercial areas and commercial units of offices, because of a lot of those, I can't see how they would adapt into residential, but the high street, I think, is going to have a massive impact now. So I think you're going to see a requirement. It's a shame because I've always liked the high street and that kind of environment, but I certainly see that slowing down. It was slowing down anyway, even pre-COVID. It was going more to the out of city centre shopping facilities. So there could be more opportunity there. You know, the conversion of these more traditional shops and units above, they work well as conversion into residential, as much as it's a shame to see that high street whittle down even more. The actual big office blocks, I mean, the good one in the last sort of 5 years were the banks. You know, the old bank buildings, some of those converted nicely. I think it, you know, location-wise, like I say, the industrial parks, I've been trying to find a commercial premises myself for the last year, and it's proven pretty much impossible. There's just nothing on the market. So I think those commercial parks I can't see how they'd adapt anyway to any form of residential thing, but I think they are incredibly busy at the moment with the industries. So yeah, I think it's just going to be the town centres. That's my kind of gut feeling on it.
Maybe there's an opportunity for you to buy some land and build a business park, and you can have your unit.
Do you know, I have thought about it, but it's a slow process though. This kind of finding land and ultimately putting that kind of footprint on it is a challenge, and it takes years. I'm not really that kind of model. I'd love to do that, but it's a slow burner.
Right, okay.
Maybe someone else has got some land, and then I can buy some of theirs.
Why not? Let's put it out there. Absolutely. Yeah. So, we've been certainly over the last kind of 9 months, I suppose, we've been seeing quite large increases in premiums across property, contractors combined. Although that hasn't impacted you yet, how would that impact the business with regards to costs and factoring that in? Obviously, that's just one element of cost, but are costs going up in general? Are you finding?
Very much so. Materials, I'm constantly getting emails and notifications from suppliers. Everything's going up. Labour rates have gone up. You know, insurance, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but generally over the years, insurance goes up in whatever sector it's in. But that, you know, ultimately you have to factor in these overheads, and ultimately it comes down to, I mean, I do some client stuff, so it comes down to, you know, your overall rates go up, or on the development side of things, you know, the only hope is that the property market stays strong or goes up. I mean, again, it's just another risk that you have to consider now and factor that into the viabilities when assessing these developments.
The property market, you talk about the property market, how do you see that going over the next, say, 2 or 3 years? Do you think there'll be a dip and then kind of a boom? Do you think it will level out? Do you think it will go down?
I really don't know. It's where a crystal ball would be really helpful. But I think it's fair to say I'm treading cautiously at the moment. I'm trying to keep, on the development side, keep the deals small, because I think the next year is going to tell a few tales. Hopefully there'll be positive tales, but you know, there's the implications of all these various schemes that have been put into place by the government in the last year. And there's obviously see where all the jobs are at when the furlough scheme ends, and all those kind of factors. as to how they'll impact the various markets. But I suppose my gut feeling is, and whether I'm just being blind to it or not, but feeling the strength of the markets at the moment and the demand, and at the end of the day, we are this small country that we are. I'm hopeful that the property market will at least stand firm, even if it doesn't continue to rise. I wouldn't be surprised if it flatlined for a while, but I hope not to see any drops in the market, because there is always that demand.
Yeah.
But there's been one hell of a demand over the last year, because people have been shopping online too much for properties. So yeah, hopefully it'll still be there.
I agree, and I think stamp duty kind of holidays helped as well. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it has helped for sure. When that ends, will things change? I don't think they'll change too negatively. I mean, I hope not, because I'm going to have some properties on the market. And ultimately, if I can get them built quick enough, they'll take advantage of that stamp duty holiday. But yeah, it's all helped. It has all helped.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, do you know what? I think that's really insightful and really interesting. And really appreciate you going through that. Is there any final words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Words of wisdom. I never do that too well.
Give it a go.
I think in, I suppose, multiple industries, but certainly in mine, just play it cautious over this next year. We've got to keep going, but yeah, that's what I'm doing anyway. It's difficult to be cautious when I've had to increase my infrastructure for the last 12 months as well. But that's always, I'm quite a cautious person anyway, but I am mindful of trying to let the dust settle a bit over the next year. So, but yeah, I'm afraid my wisdom goes only as far as that.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Glowshaw Business Chat series. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, or if you'd like to discuss how we can help your business mitigate the risks you face, please email Wes on wesleyhaines@glowshaw.co.uk.